Is Ashanti Hamilton, Ashanti, last name Hamilton, Hamilton, and I am the director of the Office of Violence Prevention for the City of Milwaukee.
And how would you describe the purpose of the Office of Violence Prevention from, your point of view and, your mindset being someone who was born and raised here?
Yeah. I think the mission and the point and purpose of this office is very simple. Our job is to try to reduce the number of people who are negatively affected and the number of people who are transmitting violence.
So, director of this office is a big role. Can you talk a little bit about why you accepted the role when it was presented to you?
Yeah, well, initially I was really not interested in taking on this responsibility, primarily because I felt that my work as an alderman and an elected official was very much supportive of this work and pushing this work forward, coming up with ideas for them to explore and implement. And I didn't want to lose the position of being able to support this work from a legislative point of view. But we were looking at the transition that the office was in. And most people in the administration, many on the council, felt like I was uniquely positioned with the understanding of the office, with the understanding and connections that I have in the community, of being able to pick up the mantle of this office and continue moving this work forward.
So you kind of answered this next question a little bit, but just get into a little bit more detail of what you feel makes you qualified to be director.
Well, primarily because a lot of the work that the office is doing right now is a lot of work that I have supported in the past. We're actually implementing some programs that I helped support and actually designed as an elected official. And this office continued to carry them out. I put a lot of work into building collaborations with community partners for this office. And I have made a commitment to advancing the purpose and mission of this office, even as an elected official, and then I did it before even being in office.
So can you just kind of mentioned this a little bit too, but can you go into a little bit more detail in terms of, how you, put in work to prevent violence before you were in this role?
Yeah. I like to point to one of the flagship programs that this office is supporting right now. A lot of people talk about the 414 Life effort and the Cure Violence model, about violence interrupters and credible messengers. The first implementation of that strategy in the city of Milwaukee was an effort that I pushed forward with a number of community advocates in the 1st Aldermanic District, working out of Garden Homes, and worked with them to design a program of interrupters that was intending to implement many of the strategies that came right out of the Cure Violence model. And so we had a number of experts that ended up coming into the city with the help of Reggie Moore and a number of our public health partners, bringing in trainers to help train people here in the city of Milwaukee to then start expanding that work. And so, recognizing the importance of that work, and some of that I think we have to get back to, of really empowering communities to be able to design for themselves what their priorities are and what a safe community looks like. That's the type of work I think this office can continue to do and build on. And a lot of that work I started for this office. The way that you see the Office of Violence Prevention today is quite different than it was 10 or 12 years ago. And I've been a strong advocate and champion of diverting that work, into what you see today.
What's your response to people who question the decision to, appoint you to this position?
Unfortunately, I would have to question the motivation of even questioning that. Did they have questions before with any other position that the mayor appointed to this position? I feel like that I am uniquely qualified for the special time that this office is operating right now. And I would put that experience and resume up against anybody that's ever done this work in the city.
Some people feel that the previous director, Arnita Holloman, was kind of scapegoated for the city's violence issues. So as director, what do you feel you should be held responsible for moving forward as we are preventing violence and kind of measuring when that happens?
Well, I think part of the problem that we're facing with the Office of Violence Prevention is the idea and expectation that's created in the community. I think we need to have a realistic conversation about what's to be expected out of the office. Violence is a thing, and it happens in communities across the country. What we want to be able to do is build an infrastructure so that there's an appropriate response to that. And in areas of the city where we're seeing an inordinate amount of violence, how is it that you can build strength in those communities so that there's resilience and a proper response when traumatic experiences occur? And I think that's the focus of the office, is being able to prepare a community to respond appropriately to violence when it occurs. The other thing is the recognition that not only individuals commit violence, right? Institutions also do the same thing. And it's oftentimes institutions that are creating the environments where individuals are perpetrating violence and make it easy for them to perpetrate violence. And so I'm hoping to interrupt that and give communities a solid footing on being able to fight back both against institutional violence against the community, as well as the occurrences of individual violences that create traumatic experience of people who live in our city.
So let's talk a little bit about measuring the success of OVP. I think this is something that is hard to measure. How do you show how violence is prevented? So what are the metrics that we're following that kind of illustrate the success of OVP when you guys do have goals that you set for, the next quarter or the year ahead? Are there specific marks that you are looking to hit that show, okay, we're doing, what we're trying to do?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that that we're focusing on coming in as we're beginning to have a front-facing program for the community. And I think one of the things that I've been able to understand about the demands of this office is understanding what council members and many of the critics in the community have been saying about the office from the outside. One of the things that I think we need to readjust is our ability to not just be measured by the rise and fall of crime statistics, but whether or not we are strengthening communities and the types of things that's necessary in order to do that. And that can be measured by our activity and performance measures in those districts. And we also need to take a stronger inventory straight from the people who live in the communities that we say that we're focusing on, so that there's actual measurements from the people who live there and not arbitrary measurements of just the number of people who attended a meeting and the number of flyers that you handed out. it's easy to count those things, but it's a much better measurement when you have a platform for the people that you're actually serving to be able to give you the feedback on whether or not you're being successful.
How challenging is it to show people that violence is or isn't being prevented when people just are reading the headlines and just hear, 4 people were shot on Brady Street last night, this person was killed in a hit and run, when that's all the community is hearing? It doesn't always feel like anything's being prevented. So what are the challenges in actually showing the work that you guys are doing here?
Right. Well, one of the things I think that we can do a better job at is actually telling the story. You would be amazed at the level of work that the frontline people are doing, who are both working within this office or are being funded by the work that's coming out of this office. You'd be amazed at the stories that they are able to tell about the impact of that work. Unfortunately, those stories are not being translated in a way that kind of tells the impact of what it means to have people who actually come from these environments, may have been perpetrators of violence in these communities in the past, having a revelation about the impact of what they did in those communities, and then committing themselves to turning that situation around in a community. I think there are so many instances that numbers and statistics have not been able to capture about that work. And I think it's going to be our challenge to be able to show the community those stories and those measurements that we are committing ourselves to. And I think we are going to create a platform for the community to be able to participate in that work as well. So they are not just standing on the sidelines watching the work. They actually have a role to play in improving it and making it better.
What would you say, this is like a 2-part question, but what are some of your short-term goals for the office versus long-term goals for the office?
So short-term goals, one, we have to staff up our office, and we have to get some of the large contracts that we have currently in evaluation. We have to start getting those flowing. Right now, we have 4 members of this office, right? It is the goal by the end of the year to staff up to approximately 12 members. So we're really functioning at 30% of our capacity right now. So the expectation that we would be able to do the work of 12 to 15 people is just unrealistic right now. So the short-term goal is to staff up, to get people who actually care about this work into the office so that they can help build stronger relationships out in the community. Second thing is to expand our internal coalition. So we need city departments, both inside of the health department as well as other city departments that are working in the same communities that we're working in, to be able to have some of the same measurements and goals and be able to articulate them and put those in front of us. And then thirdly is an expansion of our community partners. We have been able to build some very strong relationships both with the police department, and I really appreciate Chief Norman and his willingness to come to the table and have the police department be a strong partner in these efforts. But we have to build it beyond the police department, and with some of our strong community-based organizations that are actually located in the communities that's been doing this work, that have already contacted me with ideas and ways that we can expand their work. Churches in the community, have felt like they have been on the sideline or marginalized in their ability to participate in stabilizing neighborhoods. We want to expand that in the short term. So,
But you need people to do it.
and we can't reach out the entire city if we don't have people to do it. And I'll tell you one more priority, and these are all short-term priorities, right?
Okay.
With stats, this is all short-term. And the last one I think that's extremely important for us to do in the short term is build a stronger relation on the south side of OVP work. We've had a number of meetings already. They have a strong infrastructure of community partners on the south side, and I believe that they're ready to accept this work. They're actually asking for more assistance on the south side. And I think that we, especially as we're building capacity internally, that will be one of our first priorities is making sure that we're servicing that part of the city because they are in need of these strategies as well.
That's awesome. And then, do you have any long-term goals you kind of want to throw out there too? You have a lot of short-term ones, which
Yeah.
I mean I think is great because you can just kind of get to
Right.
work on those right away. But looking kind of ahead further.
Yeah, ahead further, we have to begin to expand the definition of what violence prevention means as far as our work is concerned. We spend a lot of time on dealing with the very traumatic experiences that our citizens are experiencing, and especially people who come from very challenged areas. A lot of the focus publicly of our work is on that type of behavior. Long term, we have to start moving upstream, and we have to build infrastructures in place to be able to head this off earlier, so that we're building environments and in communities where these types of experiences are reduced, by addressing the social determinants of health, as opposed to dealing with them after they occur. And I think that encompasses a whole lot of things that need to happen in order to make that successful. That's some of the work that I did before coming to this seat with our Promise initiative at the City of Milwaukee. Hopefully we can continue to maintain our support for those efforts, but that's a longer goal strategy, but we have to play a role in being able to do that because that's true prevention.
Right. I think that's a really good point that you make. There's a reason why the Office of Violence Prevention is an entity within the health department and not the police department.
Exactly.
Because there are things that need to be addressed before you get to the violence that are imperative in order to enact any sort of real change.
Absolutely.
So it's nice to hear that that's understood,
Yeah.
among leadership here. I think that matters.
Absolutely.
So I'll ask you this: how accountable should OVP be in terms of violence across the city versus like police departments and other agencies that obviously play a role as well?
Yeah, so I think this is an approach that we have to start to embrace, right? We spent a lot of years trying to get people to understand that the police department can't fight crime alone. They can't stabilize neighborhoods alone. They can't be the sole entity that's looked to in order to, address every ill, every societal ill that exists. But that's not to mean that you take all of the responsibility off the police department and then you put it on another entity that entity is now responsible for solving all of society's ills, right?
It's easy to blame one person or one.
And I think people are looking to do that, right? They want to have one entity that they can grab and say it's your fault or you're the reason. The stronger we build coalitions across the city, the more successful we are at having alternatives for being able to address different situations that arise in our communities that may lead themselves to ending up being in a violent situation. When we diversify that ability to do that, when the community is aware of all of the different resources that's at their disposal in order to address their concerns, I think we begin to release the pressure that we're putting on any individual office or entity in order to do it. I'm kind of used to this pressure, though, to be quite honest with you. As an elected official and as an alderman, I was often held responsible for the types of things that were happening in communities that I had absolutely no control over. But that didn't stop me from attempting to try to build a coalition of people that could actually address my constituents' problems. And I think you need that kind of thick skin in a position like this. You go in understanding the dynamics that exist in our community, but you strap your boots on and you go to work anyway. And that's what we're going to do in this office. Despite the critics and despite some of the expectations that may not be realistic, we're gonna go out and do what we can in order to improve the lives of the residents that live in this city.
So you talked a lot about your plans moving forward. You have a lot of short-term goals, which I think is great. So let's talk about money. How do you believe ARPA funds should be used to make the impact that you want to make in this office?
Yeah, this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment in these types of strategies. I really want to send a thank you out to the governor. I think he really put us in a position where we can demonstrate where if we're able to build the partnerships that's necessary, he put us in a position to show what's possible. And what we want to be able to demonstrate for the people who really support this work is there are many strategies out there that work. And if done the right way, this is probably a more sustainable way, a more equitable and fair way of dealing with communities in order to produce safer neighborhoods and safer environments to raise children and solve some of the problems that the city of Milwaukee is facing. The whole approach of having violence being seen as a public health issue, it allows for us to talk about the issue of violence without demonizing the people who are in the space. And I think it's important for us to be able to have a space to operate in order to do that. And these resources that are coming in through ARPA are allowing us the resources to kind of set a stage to help make that happen.
I'll ask you this too. Just given the way the previous director was let go and you brought on, I'm assuming that impacted probably the transfer of leadership. So I'll ask, what are some things that you feel were working for OVP when Arnita was, in that leadership role versus some things that you feel were not working and you want to immediately do differently?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to touch on the things that are not working, sure. Right? I don't want to put a judgment on a situation that she had to handle that may be a little different from a situation that I have to handle. But one of the things that I can be absolutely clear about to the community, to you, to everybody who's paying attention, is that we're building on work that was done with previous directors before I got here, right? We're not shifting directions. We're building and expanding on an investment that so many people who operate, that occupy these seats, not just a director. And I think there's too much focus oftentimes placed on a mayor, on one person.
The president,
Whoever.
Yeah.
Too much focus placed on one person. There were a lot of contributors in this space that were both in this office, outside of the office, in community-based organizations out in the community, who were pioneers and effective advocates for the advancement of this work. So we are not deviating from the platform that Arnita, that Reggie, that Terry Perry, that they built, right? It is our job to now take up the baton and take the work to the next level. What I feel like is my responsibility, being a track athlete myself, is to go as fast as I can, to do the best job that I can, to advance the work so that the team wins and the city benefits. And so that's going to be my focus. I am not trying to undo or change the advancement and investment that anybody that came before me did. I want to run my lap and have them and everybody else say, thanks, you did a good job with your leg. I'm not putting any unreal expectations on myself, but I do want this city to feel the impact of this office. And I want our partners that are out here doing the work to say that we were playing our role in trying to achieve this office's end.
You mentioned this a little bit before, but can you talk a little bit more about what other organizations you plan to work with that maybe the general public doesn't realize that you're working with to achieve these goals?
So I would prefer not to.
Okay.
But like to be specific.
Yeah, is there a reason why?
Yeah, because some of the people that have been willing to help in this work, they're not organizations that are traditional organizations.
I can understand.
Yeah, they're not, and in some cases would prefer not to be known. They have influences in spaces that most of us would not even want to travel into. And I would prefer to give them some of that anonymity because that's part of the success that we have. But what I can say, and what I think is probably important to share, is that we're building a platform where everybody who is serious about reducing the number of people who are negatively affected by crime, by violence, and those who are transmitting violence, if you are serious about that effort, there is a place for you to come and help achieve that goal. And that's across the board. And I have been amazed at the number of people who cringe at the conditions that exist in certain parts of our city, and they're willing to come out and help make a change in that behavior.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, a couple more questions. So let's talk about Black leadership in Milwaukee.
Oh.
We are in a really good place in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
I would call it historic. We've got a Black mayor. The current sheriff is Black, but we're about to have the first ever female sheriff in the entire state right here in Milwaukee County.
Yeah.
Common Council has, Black leadership. You are in this office. How does that make you feel to be a part of that?
Yeah, it's a great feeling and a tremendous sense of responsibility. There is a belief, I think, that we've experienced with black leadership, especially in larger cities. That when they finally reach a stage where they elect a black mayor, then people start leaving the city, businesses start leaving, and it's a negative effect on the ability of the city to operate because people don't have faith in that leadership. And I'm hoping we're in a different place now. I think that there are many more examples of the ability to have faith in black leadership. We did just have a black president. You do remember that, right? He was pretty good too.
Yeah,
And I think that there's a shared sense of responsibility of trying to do this right. I am willing to follow the lead of the mayor, the county executive. When the county executive says that he wants to make the county of Milwaukee the healthiest county in the nation, I want to play my role in helping the county executive achieve that end. When the mayor says he wants to make the city of Milwaukee the safest city in the nation, then I want to help the mayor achieve those goals. That's the only reason I'm sitting in this seat. I feel like I can play my part in helping the black leadership in this city achieve their goals.
And do you feel that it's the same reverse? Do you feel like they all feel the same about you and your office and your success here as well?
I feel very supported in this office. I feel very supported in this office, despite the public criticism, despite the skepticism. It's a good thing that I was born and raised in this city, that I am tried and tested in my commitment, to these goals. And I think that we can inspire more people to participate in this effort. And it is my intention and goal to be successful doing it.
Awesome. Last question. So let's talk a little bit about some news of the day.
Okay.
Every morning we have our morning meeting and we talk about, kind of what we're going to cover. And today there was a lot going on. We had a series of shootings last night, one on Galena, one near Brady Street. We've had a lot of hit and runs, fatal, across the city. So how does OVP respond to these specific acts of violence in our community?
Yeah, so we're working with our partners already to get some of the details about what was going on in both of those situations, to see if there's a space for either our office or our partners to participate in making sure that violence doesn't perpetuate in either of those situations. A team has already been deployed from our partners, from our office and our partners, to both of those locations, so that they could see what role they could play in order to help. So they are already on the ground in both of those neighborhoods, attempting to build some relationships to ensure that if there's an opportunity for them to quell any ongoing violence in those types of situations, or to help people navigate through what has already happened, they're there for those purposes too. So they have already been deployed. They've already been reporting back what some of the challenges are. So they will be there until those things are satisfied.
Follow-up question: how do you all decide, which events to devote that time and dedication to? Because there's so much happening every day. What goes into the decision that we're going to send people here, we're going to work, on this. Versus not doing anything.
Exactly. So there is a triaging that happens with our partners, including the police department. They initially go in and kind of assess the situation, and once they do that, they'll share that information back with our team. if there is a role for our team to play, whether it is in helping children get counseling for traumatic situation, whether it's as helping with housing because of a situation, we have a temporary housing situation that is needed, or whether there is some interruption in the thought that there may be retaliation in this situation. Like there's a kind of a triaging of that to see if any of those types of situations exist, and then based on that, do we have partners that can actually help in any of those situations, and then we make the referrals and we try to ensure that the connections are made. So there's a process that's kind of in place with the partners that are at the table to see where we need to devote resources. Almost every situation is in need of something, which is why the resources, when you talked about money, is very important, because in order to have a real structure that can respond to all of these types of different scenarios that may occur whenever violence happens in the community, you have to have the infrastructure that can actually, produce the right result for you to support that. And so it's always been a challenge since I've been in this work to be able to count on resources so that happens. It seems as if, which is why I like to focus on institutional violence too, because we have had systems that were designed to not provide support in these very desperate situations, very traumatic instances. And oftentimes the institution came into a very traumatic situation and made the problem worse. We don't want to run systems like that. And I think part of the work that we do is point that out. As we're evaluating situations, we're also evaluating systems.
Anything else you want people to know as you have stepped into this role? What any lasting words for the city?
Yeah, just that the title of this office can be very misleading, right? The Office of Violence Prevention. We have been a society where we have not found a way to prevent violence as a society. So we know that these instances of violence will occur. What every community should be able to have is an infrastructure that appropriately responds to violence with dignity and respect to the people who experience it. And I think, if we take a look at how these things develop, we just went through a period of COVID. There was a complete understanding about how to deal with people who had COVID and how to have people who had pre-existing conditions and were predisposed to catching it, and the things that we needed to do for them. And then, people who were healthy, and then the types of things that they needed to do in order to keep other people healthy. And then things that everybody did with wearing masks and social distancing and those types of things in order to reduce the number of occurrences of COVID-19 in our community. Everybody had to play a role. Everybody understood what they needed to do in order to reduce that. That's the same type of understanding that we need to have around violence. And once we get to that stage, I think everybody then will take some ownership, and they will see the role that they must play in order to fight this, and we'll have a safer, more enjoyable city in the end.
Awesome. Allison, do you have any questions that you think I missed?
I just because I did this story like a couple months ago. It was right before Arnita was removed from the position, but like the Public Health and Safety Commission, I know, like put out all these metrics for OVP.
Mhm.
Is that something that you are going to be working on? Because I think there was like a January deadline too. Like Alderman Murphy, I know, is like kind of the one spearheading that. I guess just she's the more eloquent question asker, so
Yeah.
bear with me. But I guess just what
Yeah.
you're.
What are we? So we're picking up all of those responsibilities. I think many of our partners, and I'm including the council and the administration when I say partners. They have come up with many great ideas about, how to use some of these resources and how to have an impact in areas where they have a lot of experience in. So we're picking up those, and some of those metrics that we are currently working on already embrace some of those suggestions that were coming from alders. What we're trying to do is not run from the type of data that any entity is looking for. We want to be able to collect it all and make comprehensive reports. So yes, we're picking those up, and those are part of the short-term goals, that we are trying to answer. And I think part of our challenge, though, right now is, and I appreciate the support that both the council and the administration are given in this regard, which is time to get people in place so that we can satisfy all of the requests that are coming from a lot of different areas. So we are taking those directives. The specifics of them we have already incorporated with some of our data people here. So.
But January might be a little too soon to get all this done.
Yeah, January, from the looks of it, may not be, the appropriate deadline, but we are working towards that end regardless. Right, we're going to go as fast as we possibly can when it comes to satisfying those requests. So we had a number of them come in, even with some of our partners that we that have deadlines with grants that we are partner with other entities on. They also have deadlines that they're trying to meet, which is why it's important for us to be able to continue to work to help them meet their deadlines, even as we're gearing up our staffing and satisfying our own contracts. So it's a bunch of balls in the air when it comes to actually running a office. But the responsibility that we have to the community and what their expectations are, we still have to confront those and try to meet those as well. And and we're moving.
Moving on the track field.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, because I knew you had done this story before.
Yeah. I was just going to ask too.
Yeah,
just because you've been in the public eye and public office, is there anything about this role that surprised you?
That's a good question.
Yeah. The pace of this work is constant. I always knew that this was very difficult work. I always knew that this would be a challenge. What I did not know was there are some decisions that we make as policymakers, requirements that we put on departments that actually make the work more difficult. And even in our efforts to try to help sometimes, when you're not close enough to the work, a lot of times you can do things, that is counterproductive to the types of things that you want to see. And that was a surprise because very quickly, once I came over, and I haven't had 2 full weeks yet, all right? And already trying to, get that on the right track, you realize that, whoa, those were hurdles that we put up that made it difficult to get these things done. I would say that was probably the biggest surprise. I plan on working with my colleagues and my former colleagues.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have plans to kind of circle back with your former colleagues and share that perspective and,
Yeah.
and hopefully help streamline the collaboration.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I think that's one of the benefits of having me here. You know, there's no one over there that I would not consider a friend, and I think everyone over there really has the best interest of the city of Milwaukee at heart. So, you know, regardless of how they feel about this work in particular, I feel like they want to see the success. They want to see the impact, and you know, I want to help make that happen.
Awesome. Anything else, Ellen?
Okay.
Yeah, that was a really good question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.